Richman Poorman. Who's the Beggar Man or Thief? By Moses David. Written the 11th of November, 1974. The story of the rich and the poor, a child's course in economics, or What's the Matter with the Oil and Money? Letter number 321. Dear children, once upon a time in a very big city, in a very big country, there lived very many poor people and very few rich. Now in the beginning God, their heavenly Father, before anybody was rich or poor, had given everybody about the same amount of land and food and things with which to build their houses and make their clothes and beasts to carry their burdens and help plough the land, so they could grow their food and carry their things they made to market, to trade for other things that other people made that they liked and needed, and who liked and needed to trade their things for their things. See? And everybody was happy and had everything they really needed and had no wars. Everybody worked hard to grow their own food and make their own clothes and build their own houses, so each had plenty of what he needed. But some worked even harder than others and grew and made enough extra things to trade for the extra things and food that other hard workers grew and made too. That way, different people grew and made different things they could trade for other different things that other people grew and made. So people got to doing what they called trading, and this business of taking all these different things to market to trade for all these other different things made by other people was called marketing and trade. Some people grew lots of food, but not much cotton or wool to make their clothes with, so they would take their extra food to their market and trade it for the cotton and wool that other people had lots of but needed more food. Others had lots of trees and grew lots of timber for building houses, much more than they themselves really needed, but they too needed more food or clothing, so they'd take their wood to market to trade for the food and clothing they needed. See? Everything moved rather slowly, because they only had horses and oxen and elephants and camels and animals like that to carry all these things. So life went rather slow and easy, and nobody was in much of a hurry, and they had lots of time to relax, ate good, natural, healthful food the way God made it, and had lots of good, normal, healthy exercise, working and walking and riding and trading and playing together. They breathed nice, clean, fresh air, and drank nice, clean, pure water, and got lots of nice, quiet, restful sleep at night, and lived in comfy, warm little tents, cabins, huts, or houses with little fires and the few things they needed and the few clothes they wore. And everybody was pretty happy, and there weren't many fusses or fights or wars, because everybody was healthy and happy and had what they needed and shared and helped each other. Because God taught them to love one another and to help each other and be happy with their happy, healthful little lives and the very few things that they really needed. Nobody really needed very much, just enough to eat and clothes to keep warm and tiny tents, caves or houses to live in for shelter, and a few animals to help them with their work. So everybody was happy and contented with the little he had, because it was enough to satisfy all his needs and the needs of others. But the devil, God's and man's enemy, was not happy about all this, because he likes to make people unhappy and sad and mad, and he is very unhappy when everybody's glad, because that makes him very mad. So he decided to do something about it, to try to ruin all this nice, peaceful world that God had created, and destroy as many of these happy people as he could, and try to wreck the whole thing so he could be happy. So he began causing all kinds of trouble. he began tempting some of these happy, contented people with the knowledge of evil, called higher education, or how to be unhappy by thinking you can be happier by knowing more than you really need to know and getting more things than you really need to have. Some people believed him, so they began learning a lot of evil things called man's wisdom and higher education, and they began stealing from each other the things that belonged to others, or tricking them out of some of these things so they themselves could have more. The people who began getting all this evil knowledge of how to trick and rob others and lie and steal and cheat and even kill to get it began to be known as the rich and the powerful and the great ones, the smart ones. While the poor people they were outsmarting and robbing and cheating and killing to get more than their share became known as the poor, dumb, uneducated, overworked laborers, the weak and the meek ones. The great and powerful rich, by their evil wisdom of the devil, were even so smart with their evil knowledge and lies, called higher education, propaganda, and advertising, that they even convinced lots of poor people that they were right and persuaded them to voluntarily give up some of the few things they had to make them even poorer and the rich even richer, so the rich could have more and more and the poor less and less. These are called taxes and profits and interest. The rich even persuaded and forced the poor to make them something new, called war and weapons, like swords and spears and guns and tanks and planes and bombs, so the rich could fight these wars with other rich people to try to grab what they had too. They even made the poor people fight these wars for them, when all the poor really wanted was peace and enough to eat and wear and a place to sleep. But some of the poor were not very happy about this, and began to complain and refuse to pay these taxes and fight these wars, and rebelled against letting the rich rob and kill them this way and make them so unhappy. This is called revolution. So the rich used their weapons to force the poor to fight their wars and pay these taxes, profits, and interests, and continued to rob and kill them by force if they refused. But the rich needed a lot of smart people called technicians and engineers and scientists to make these weapons and war machines for them, and teach the poor how to build them, and also how to make other fancy things they wanted but didn't really need, like machines to travel very fast in, because the rich were always in a big hurry to make more riches and fight more wars and have more power to try to be happier than anybody else. The weapons and machines of war are called munitions, and the smart people whom the rich trained to teach the poor how to use them and lead them in these wars are called the military, and these fast ways of getting around are called modern transportation. The rich also needed smart people to build ways of getting messages to these war leaders faster so they could fight the wars better, and to their marketplaces quicker so they could make more riches in a hurry. So they paid these smarter poor people more things to invent these quicker ways of getting messages, ideas, and information back and forth, called communications, like the telegraph, telephone, radio, television, etc. The rich also had to have quicker ways of exchanging the extra things they didn't need for other things other rich had that they wanted to trade them for, as it was pretty hard to keep carrying them back and forth to each other, even on these big new machines they made. So the rich invented a new way of trading these goods back and forth without even moving a lot of them, so they could just keep them in their bigger and bigger barns and storage places called warehouses without even moving them around too much, except when absolutely necessary. This new way of exchanging goods without actually moving them very often was called money. At first, this money was something really valuable, like gold and silver and diamonds and jewels, and pretty things like that that the rich always liked to decorate themselves and their houses with, and which they valued very much to show that they were very rich. But the rich also wanted other things like finer food and clothing and grander houses and fancier machines and bigger lands. So they would agree amongst themselves to trade some of these very valuables like gold and silver and jewels that they liked so much for these other things they needed and wanted, like houses and lands where they grew things, and factories where they made things, and the machines to make them and travel in and talk back and forth with. The rich man who paid this kind of valuable money for the valuable things he wanted was called the buyer, and the man who traded him the things for the money was called the seller. This became known as buying and selling for money, a whole new way of trading things back and forth. It worked pretty good for a while, but pretty soon the rich became so rich and paid such big prices, the amount of money you pay for a thing you want, for such big things they wanted, that it was even hard to carry the gold and silver and jewels back and forth, as they became so heavy and hard to hide from robbers and other rich who might rob them while carrying them. So they had to invent a whole new kind of money that wouldn't be so hard to hide and carry and trade, called paper money, or currency. Each rich country, run by its rich people, would hide their gold and silver and jewels in strong, thick-walled buildings called treasuries, vaults, banks, etc. Then they'd print these little pieces of paper in a special way, each little piece showing that the rich of that country had that much gold or silver, etc., in the treasury or the bank, as much as was written on the piece of paper. Then they could take it to the bank or the treasury and trade the piece of paper for the real thing, the gold or the silver. They could just trade these little pieces of paper for the things they needed or wanted, so they wouldn't have to move the actual valuable gold and silver money around so much. The little pieces of paper money were supposed to show that they had that much real gold and silver money in the bank that they could trade it in for if they wanted to. This money, monkey business, was all called the monetary system, or a very easy way of trading things quickly without actually having to move anything but these little bits of paper money. But pretty soon the rich got so rich, even with paper money, that it would have taken a lot of trucks to carry it around while trading it from one rich man to another. They got so rich that even the paper money got too heavy to carry. So the rich invented another whole new way of trading called checks, a way of not only trading goods or gold, but even trading paper money, so they wouldn't even have to move the paper money so much back and forth from bank to bank. They could leave the paper money in the bank and write these little notes to the bank called checks, telling the bank to pay so-and-so so much money out of their money at the bank called a bank account. Then they could just write checks for their money in their bank accounts to pay for the things they wanted to buy. This made the big business of big buying and selling of big things by the big rich much easier and faster in a new kind of market called the stock market, where they could trade things back and forth without ever even seeing them or the money either. They could even trade whole factories and businesses and gold and silver and sugar and cotton and wheat and all kinds of things at the stock market with these little pieces of paper called checks, and the things or parts of things they wanted to trade were shown by papers called stocks. The stock markets even trade paper money that's not even paid or there yet, called bonds. These are loans or amounts of money which people, businesses, or governments have promised to pay later when they have it, because they don't have it right now, but hope to have it later by selling goods or doing business or taxing the people some more so they can pay it later on. These promises to pay later are called bonds, because that word is supposed to mean they're bound to pay it sooner or later, because these bonds are also pieces of paper which say they promise to pay it back sometime together with even a little bit more, called interest on these loans. The stocks are also pieces of paper called shares, which means that if you own one of them, one of these little pieces of paper called a share, you own a share in some kind of business, factory, gold mine, or stocks of goods like gold, silver, and other precious and useful metals, or foods like sugar and cocoa and coffee, or textiles like cotton or wool, etc. These actual real goods or things are called commodities, and they are also bought and sold on the stock market for various amounts of money called stock prices, paper money which is actually exchanged by these little pieces of paper called checks. But the rich are always in such a hurry to get rich quicker, even these ways of trading money and things called goods, etc., have become too slow. Even the checks are so many now, they're becoming too heavy for the banks to handle so fast, because things are being bought and sold at such a rate and money exchanged so fast, the banks are having a hard time keeping up with it all. So the rich have had the smart, or educated poor, invent some new machines called computers to keep track of all that money, stocks, bonds, checks, shares, goods, etc., etc. Pretty soon, you won't even have to carry money or checks around to buy things, but just a little number on a little card that the cashier at the store can stick in a new kind of cash register. This is a machine they usually put your cash or money or checks in. But instead of putting your money in it, they'll just put your number in it and how much the goods you bought cost, or the price. Then, this will be automatically taken out of your money at the bank by the computer and transferred electronically on electric wires to the bank account of the store from whom you bought that thing or things, and put in the store's bank account of money instead. This way they don't even have to move the checks or actual money from one bank to the other, but you'll just be billed by your bank for what you bought, and the stores where you bought these things will be given credit for the money you will have paid out of your bank account. This is called a credit system, and will be the new way of trading or exchanging money and things from person to person by computer. The money the poor are paid is called wages, for working and growing or making things, or moving and carrying them, or buying and selling them, or exchanging messages by means of communications like the telephone, or performing lots of other kinds of work called services, because you are their servants, doing these things for the rich, like building and painting, or fixing their houses, or cleaning them, or cooking their food, or driving their cars or trucks, trains or planes. The money the poor get for doing these things for the rich is called wages, or salaries, or pay, and the ones who do the hardest work with their feet and hands and backs are called laborers, but the ones who do the head work with their brains to invent and operate these things for the rich are called technicians, engineers, clerks, military officers, managers, brokers, business experts, scientists, builders, etc. Also, since the rich are so often sick because of all their money worries over their riches and struggles for power and wars, etc., they need doctors and drugs to try to make them well and happy again, which they seldom are, since God doesn't bless them for robbing, cheating, and oppressing the poor, and breaking his laws of love to do it. They also have so many fights and arguments amongst themselves, they have to have lawyers and courts and judges to try to settle them. They also need military leaders and officers to lead the poor soldiers to fight the wars of the rich with other rich. The rich also need teachers to teach their own children how to get rich and stay rich and oppress the poor, do business, fight wars, etc. And also they need teachers to train the poor to do their work, invent and operate their machines, perform their services as their servants, and conduct their businesses, communications, transportation, governments, wars, etc. The rich also need religion and rich religious organizations like the churches to try to comfort themselves for all the evil they've been doing, and the poor they've been robbing, and the wars they've been fighting, and also to subdue the poor and keep them from complaining about their poverty with promises of future heavenly happiness, and to brainwash the poor of any anti-rich ideas and indoctrinate them with complacency and willingness to be peaceful servants to the rich and work hard for them and do all these things for them as the will of God, which to religion is the will of the rich. So the rich also need the clergy or preachers and priests and churches to keep the poor peaceful and willing workers. All these smarter, better educated, better trained servants of the rich who do this head work more than hand work are called white-collar workers, professionals, or the middle class, who make more money and are paid more than the poor, hand-working, hard-working, so-called blue-collar, ordinary laborers who do the manual, menial tasks and even work for the middle class too,